My name is Liam Carter, I'm 28 years old, and I'll never forget the humiliation I felt the moment I locked eyes with Mrs. Dorsey, my former high school teacher, right as she stepped into my Uber. There she was, dressed in her usual smugness, clutching a tote bag that practically screamed, "I'm better than you." Her fake smile vanished the second she realized who I was. But when she laughed, yeah, that laugh, that's when something inside me snapped. But trust me, her laughter didn't last long, because when she opened that letter from the school principal, her face drained whiter than a ghost. And let me tell you, Karma's menu had been served, hot and fresh. Before I tell you how everything flipped in ways she never saw coming, make sure to like, subscribe, and drop in the comments where you're watching from. You won't believe how sweet this revenge turned out. So let me take you back to when I was just a 16-year-old kid, sitting in the back row of Mrs. Dorsey's class, praying every day that the clock would move faster. But time felt frozen in that room, especially when you were the kid everyone whispered about. The poor kid. My family wasn't like the others. My dad worked double shifts as a janitor, and my mom cleaned houses to keep food on our table. I wore thrift store shoes, my backpack had a broken zipper, and no matter how hard I tried, nothing was ever enough for Mrs. Dorsey. She had this sick talent for picking favorites. If you had rich parents, you were golden. But kids like me, we were invisible, unless she needed someone to publicly embarrass. I still remember the day she caught me sketching cars in my notebook during math. Instead of telling me to focus like a normal teacher, she snatched the notebook, held it up to the class and said, "Liam, this is why you'll never be more than a cab driver." The whole class burst into laughter. And yeah, that laughter burned into my skin. She made it her mission to remind me, day after day, that kids like me don't win. We don't succeed. We survive, barely. And back then, I believed her. But life has a funny way of circling back. Fast forward over a decade later, the tables were about to turn. Mrs. Dorsey was about to find out that the cab driver she mocked wasn't just her Uber driver today. He was something far, far bigger. And the principal's letter in her hand, that was just the opening act. She opened the back door of my car, barely looking at me at first. But the second she glanced at my face, her eyes narrowed. Her lips curled into this half smirk, half sneer. Well, if it isn't Liam Carter," she said, adjusting her sunglasses like she was preparing for a show. "Didn't take long to end up right where I predicted. Driving folks around, huh?" I didn't answer. Not yet. I just smiled, tapped start ride, and pulled away from the curb. But my heart was pounding. Not from embarrassment. Not anymore. This wasn't the same scared teenager she used to crush with her words. This time, I was in control. The first few minutes of the ride were filled with her fake, arrogant chatter. You know, it's important to find your level in life. Not everyone's meant for success. Some people are service providers. Nothing wrong with that, I suppose. Her voice was exactly as I remembered. Sharp, condescending, poison wrapped in politeness. Then she asked me the question that finally made me smirk. "So, is this what you do now? Full-time Uber? Or are you still figuring out what to do with your life?" I could have crushed her right then with the truth, but I didn't. Not yet. Because the real punch was coming. As fate would have it, her destination was the local school district headquarters. She muttered something about attending a disciplinary meeting. "Some ridiculous investigation," she groaned. "You know how schools are these days. Too soft. Can't discipline students properly anymore without someone whining about it." The irony nearly made me laugh out loud. I pulled into the parking lot, and as she stepped out, she glanced back at me. "Well, at least you know your place now." Then, with that same smug tilt of her chin, she strutted toward the main entrance. But she had no idea, no clue, that the letter waiting for her inside was written by someone she thought she would never cross paths with again. Someone who now held more power over her career than she could possibly imagine. Me. See, what Mrs. Dorsey didn't know was that after high school, I didn't just survive. I thrived. I used every insult, every humiliation, every dismissal as fuel. I started small, doing side gigs, fixing cars, tutoring, hustling like my life depended on it. Because it did. Then I got a scholarship. Not through her, obviously, but through a foundation that supported underprivileged kids who were overlooked by the very system teachers like her abused. I studied business, graduated top of my class, and opened my own educational tech company. And guess what? That company now partners with the school district, not just as a vendor, but as an advisor. Meaning, when disciplinary cases come up, especially ones involving teachers accused of misconduct, guess whose signature lands on the recommendation letters? You guessed it. Mine. And Mrs. Dorsey. Oh, she was about to learn that mocking students doesn't age well, especially when one of those students now gets a say in whether you keep your job. The day that broke my soul. When I was 16 years old, all I wanted was to stay invisible. I did everything I could not to draw attention. But with someone like Mrs. Dorsey, that was impossible. That day she stormed into the classroom sharper than ever. Her voice echoed before she even stepped in. Today I want to see who actually cares about their future. Spoiler, some of you are already destined to fail. I was actually excited that day. I had spent weeks working on a design project I was proud of, a concept for an educational app to help students like me who didn't have access to tutoring or proper materials. While other students displayed simple posters, my hands shook with nerves as I held my project. When it was finally my turn, I stood up, heart pounding, and started explaining. My project is called Level Up. It's a free app that connects underprivileged students with volunteer tutors. I thought if, alright. She yanked the paper out of my hands and without even really looking at it, ripped it clean in 4 pieces. Liam, do you know what the problem is with kids like you? You live in a fantasy world. You don't have the discipline or the brains for this. You better get ready, kid. The best you'll ever do is drive a cab, or maybe an Uber if you're lucky. The entire class exploded in laughter. My eyes burned, my hands shook, and my throat felt like it was closing. I wanted to disappear. But you know what hurt the most? It wasn't the paper being shredded. It wasn't the laughter. It was looking around that room and realizing no one said a word. Not a single teacher. Not a single classmate. Nobody stood up for me. That day, I walked home completely broken. My mom saw me come through the door with red eyes and a pale face. She asked what happened, and all I could mumble was, "Nothing, Mom. Just school." But something inside me snapped. The boy who believed he was worthless, who thought he wasn't meant for anything, died that day. And in his place, a voice was born. A voice that whispered, "I will shut this woman down. One day, she will swallow every word." If you've ever been through something like this, you know exactly how it feels. And if you haven't, I pray you never do. But listen, if you're hearing this now, hit that like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, have you ever been underestimated too? Because trust me, the world spins. That night, instead of crying, I did something else. I grabbed an old notebook, sat at the kitchen table, and wrote 3 words on the first page. Never weak again. And that was the real beginning. For the next few days after that humiliation, I barely spoke to anyone. I walked through the halls like a ghost, blending into the background, doing everything I could to avoid her eyes, and everyone else's. But there's something strange about hitting rock bottom. Once you're there, the fear is gone, because you realize there's nothing left to lose. One evening, while helping my dad fix an old delivery van in our driveway, I caught myself staring at the engine for a long time, not really seeing it, just thinking. And then my dad, without even looking up from under the hood, said something that stuck with me forever. "Son, broken things can be fixed, as long as someone's willing to get their hands dirty." That sentence hit me deeper than he probably intended. I wasn't just thinking about the engine. I was thinking about me, about my life, about everything Mrs. Dorsey made me believe I'd never become. That night, I sat at my tiny desk, opened that same notebook, and started writing plans. Crazy ones, bold ones. I didn't care how impossible they sounded. I scribbled ideas for a tutoring business, a side hustle fixing computers, and a plan to teach myself coding from free online resources. Every insult she threw at me became fuel. Every laugh from my classmates became motivation. My mind shifted from why me to watch me. Weekends that most kids spent at parties or hanging out, I spent learning, fixing anything I could get my hands on. Old laptops, broken game consoles, neighborhood cars. If it was broken, I figured out how to fix it. And every time I solved a problem, I felt something grow inside me, something Mrs. Dorsey couldn't take away. But it wasn't just about money. It was about control, about proving, first to myself, that I wasn't the failure she painted me as. There were nights I barely slept. I'd wake up before school to squeeze in an hour of online courses, go to class pretending I cared, then come home and dive back into my real education, the one I was building for myself. By the time senior year came around, I was making more fixing electronics and tutoring neighborhood kids than most part-time jobs paid. Slowly, quietly, I was building something. And the best part? I kept it quiet. Mrs. Dorsey had no idea. No one at school did. I wanted them to think I was still that same quiet, invisible kid, because it made what was coming next even sweeter. This wasn't just about proving her wrong anymore. This was about building a life so undeniable that when the day came, when the tables finally turned, she wouldn't just be surprised. She'd be speechless. And that day wasn't as far away as it seemed. I still remember the day like it was yesterday. Sitting at our cracked kitchen table, flipping through the mail like it was part of some pointless routine, bills, ads, junk, when an envelope caught my eye. It wasn't like the others, thick, formal. My name typed neatly on the front, from the Bright Minds Foundation. I nearly didn't open it. I was so used to rejection, disappointment, and people telling me no that part of me just assumed it was another one. But when I tore it open, my hands started shaking. I read the first line 5 times before it sank in. Congratulations, Liam Carter. You've been awarded the Bright Minds Scholarship for Academic Innovation. A full scholarship, tuition, books, living expenses, everything. Paid for. I couldn't believe it. I literally sat there staring at the letter, waiting for someone to jump out and tell me it was a prank. But it wasn't. This was real. When I told my parents, my mom broke down in tears. My dad, the man who barely ever showed emotion, just grabbed me in the tightest hug and whispered, "Told you. Broken things can be fixed." This wasn't just a scholarship. It was a middle finger to every single person who told me I wasn't enough. Especially her. The best part? The scholarship wasn't based on grades alone. It was awarded to students who demonstrated innovation, creativity, and community impact. Everything Mrs. Dorsey said I didn't have. The tutoring side hustle I started, they were impressed. The tech repairs, they called it entrepreneurial spirit. The free coding classes I offered to younger neighborhood kids, that was the clincher. For the first time in my life, someone saw my effort. Someone rewarded it. When I walked back into school that Monday, nothing about me looked different. Same backpack, same cheap shoes, same quiet stare. But something inside me had shifted forever. I passed Mrs. Dorsey in the hallway. She gave me that usual fake smile, patronizing nod combo she always used. "Morning, Liam. Keeping out of trouble?" I just smiled back. "More than you know." I didn't say anything else. Because I didn't need to. She had no idea, not yet. That scholarship was just the beginning. It opened doors I didn't even know existed. Conferences, mentors, networking events. I met people who actually wanted me to succeed. People who looked at my ideas and said, "Yes, let's build this." It was like breathing fresh air after years of suffocating. For the first time, the future wasn't something to fear. It was something to chase. And I was ready to run faster than anyone expected. College was supposed to be intimidating. New city, new people, new rules. But to me, it felt like freedom. No one knew my past. No one called me the poor kid. No Mrs. Dorsey sneering from the front of the room. For the first time, I could breathe, but I didn't forget where I came from. Not for a second. While other students were partying, exploring campus life, or wasting time, I had one mission: build something of my own. It started small. I noticed that plenty of students were struggling with tech, broken laptops, phones that wouldn't turn on, software problems. So I put up a few flyers around campus. Tech fix, fast, reliable repairs, student discounts. My phone started buzzing that same afternoon. I didn't just repair stuff. I solved problems. Fixed things others said weren't fixable, and every customer led to another. Word spread faster than I ever imagined. Before long, dorm rooms turned into mini workstations, with motherboards, screens, and wires scattered all over. But then I noticed something bigger. Students weren't just struggling with hardware. They struggled with learning, especially those from lower income backgrounds like me. They couldn't afford tutors, expensive software, or private help. That's when the real idea hit me. What if I build a platform? A place where students can get affordable tutoring and tech help all in one. I sketched it out. A hybrid service, half tutoring, half technical support, fully student-focused. I called it Level Up Hub. Within months, I partnered with a few classmates studying education, math, and computer science. We offered tutoring sessions for half the price of the university's tutoring center and way better service. We didn't just help students pass exams. We helped them understand, grow, and solve their own problems. It wasn't just about money. It was about changing the rules, especially for students like me who always felt left behind. By the end of sophomore year, we had a client list of over 300 students. I registered the business officially, built a simple website, and hired 3 part-time employees. What started as a side hustle was now something real, something sustainable, something mine. But I wasn't done. Not even close. Because the more it grew, the more I realized something terrifying and thrilling. This was bigger than a campus business. This could be a citywide service, a statewide service, maybe even national. And deep down, a voice started whispering, "One day, this thing you're building will cross paths with Mrs. Dorsey again. And when it does, she won't be the one in control anymore." That day wasn't just a dream anymore. It was a countdown. By the time I hit my final year in college, Level Up Hub wasn't just a student side gig anymore. It was a full-fledged company. What started as me fixing laptops and tutoring math had transformed into a multi-service educational tech business. We expanded fast. Too fast, honestly. Word of mouth exploded beyond campus. Parents started calling. Local schools reached out. Small businesses asked if we could offer workshops on digital literacy for their employees. I rented a tiny office downtown, barely enough space for 4 desks and a coffee machine. But to me, it felt like a skyscraper. I hired part-time coders, admin staff, and more tutors. We weren't just fixing problems anymore. We were building futures. The turning point came when I pitched an idea to the local school district, a fully online, low-cost tutoring platform for underprivileged students, integrated directly with school curriculums. At first, they brushed me off. Who was I? Just a kid with a tiny business. But when I showed them the data, the student pass rates, the testimonials, the success stories, they couldn't ignore it. It started with 1 contract, then another, then 5 more. Suddenly, Level Up Hub was officially partnered with half the school districts in the region. And with that came power. Real power. Not just financial, but influence. I started sitting at meetings with school boards, district supervisors, and educational policymakers. People who, years ago, wouldn't even look me in the eye. I'll never forget the first time I saw the district's official partner list, with Level Up Hub CEO Liam Carter, right next to billion-dollar companies. And guess what? One of those contracts involved a very specific school, my old high school. The moment I saw the name pop up on the partnership proposal, my heart skipped. Full circle. The place that tried to crush me now had to work with me. I was professional about it, signed the contracts, sent over the implementation plans. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just business. This was fate drawing a perfect line between my past and my future. And then something even more interesting happened. An email landed in my inbox from the district's Human Resources Department. Subject, Teacher Misconduct Investigation, Request for Advisory Review. Attached was a file. A complaint filed by multiple parents and students against none other than Mrs. Dorsey. The accusations were serious. Verbal abuse, bullying, discrimination. Same patterns, same poison. She hadn't changed a bit. And here's the kicker. As a district partner, my company's advisory board was invited to review educational conduct cases. My signature, along with others, had weight in disciplinary recommendations. For a moment, I just stared at that screen. This is really happening. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't revenge fantasized in my head. It was real. The same woman who said I'd never amount to anything was now waiting for a decision that had my name on it. And trust me, I wasn't about to miss that meeting. I opened the complaint file expecting, honestly, I don't know what. Maybe isolated incidents, maybe a misunderstanding. But what I saw wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a pattern I knew too well. Page after page, statement after statement. It was like reading my own memories, just written by a new generation of students. Students who'd been told they were worthless. Students mocked for stuttering, for struggling in math, for coming from working-class families. One line punched me right in the gut. She told me I should stop wasting time thinking I could ever be more than a janitor. A janitor. The same insult she used against me. She was still using it, over a decade later. The more I read, the more something inside me shifted from anger to clarity. This wasn't personal anymore. This was bigger. This was about every kid who ever walked into her classroom believing they had potential and walked out doubting it. The district's email was clear. They were assembling an advisory panel, including members from partner organizations, like mine. We were asked to review the complaints and provide recommendations regarding her employment. And let me be clear, this wasn't symbolic. Our advisory notes influenced the outcome, heavily. I closed the file and sat back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. Part of me wanted to celebrate, to fist pump the air and shout, finally. But another part of me felt something else, a strange weight, because I realized something that day. Revenge doesn't hit as hard as justice does. This wasn't just payback for me. This was about accountability, about making sure no kid ever left her classroom feeling like I did. The district set the hearing date for the following week. An official review meeting at the school board's headquarters. I confirmed my attendance immediately. A few days later, another email landed. This one made me freeze. Confirmed. Mrs. Dorsey has been notified of the hearing. Attached is the list of advisory attendees. I opened the file, and there it was. Liam Carter, founder and CEO, Level Up Hub. My name, right there, in black and white. I sat there for a long time thinking about what that moment would look like. Would she recognize me? Would she remember? Would she laugh like she did in my Uber? Or would that laughter finally die in her throat? The countdown had officially begun, and this time, I wasn't the scared kid in the back row. I was the one sitting at the front of the room. The morning of the hearing, I stood in front of the mirror adjusting my jacket, staring at the man I'd become. Sharp suit, clean haircut, calm eyes, but behind those eyes, a storm. I walked into the district headquarters like I belonged there, because I did. Staff members greeted me with polite nods. Some even smiled and said, "Mr. Carter, this way, please." Mr. Carter. Yeah. Still felt strange hearing that. The boardroom was a glass-walled conference room overlooking the city. Sleek table, leather chairs, digital nameplates. Mine read, Liam Carter, CEO, Level Up Hub, Advisory Partner. I took my seat at the table, opened my laptop, reviewed the files one last time, and waited. A few other advisory members arrived. District officials, legal counsel, HR reps. Everyone greeted each other casually. For them, this was just another day, another case, but not for me. At exactly 9 a.m. the door opened. I looked up, and there she was, Mrs. Dorsey. For a split second, she didn't notice me. Her expression was the same as always. Chin high, arms crossed, like the world owed her something. She scanned the room, confident, smug, until her eyes landed on me. Her entire face froze, eyebrows lifted, jaw slackened. Her mouth opened just slightly as if to speak, but no words came out. I didn't smile. I didn't nod. I didn't say a word. I just looked her dead in the eye, perfectly calm. And in that silence, every memory, every insult, every wound she left on me echoed between us. She tried to compose herself, but her hands fumbled with her bag. Her face paled. She took her seat, right across from me. The district director cleared his throat. Let's begin. We are here today to review formal complaints filed against Mrs. Dorsey regarding conduct unbecoming of an educator. This panel, including advisory partners, will hear the statements and review the evidence. I stayed silent, professional, focused. As the HR representative read aloud the list of accusations, Mrs. Dorsey shifted in her chair. Gone was the arrogant smile. Gone was the fake confidence. Her hands trembled slightly as the words stacked against her like bricks in a wall she couldn't climb. They pulled up audio recordings, written statements, parent complaints, student testimonies, and every word was a mirror of the past, my past. I was asked for my assessment. I opened my file calmly, hands steady, and spoke clearly. The patterns here are not isolated incidents. They are consistent. They demonstrate a sustained history of emotional abuse, academic sabotage, and discrimination against students, particularly those from underprivileged backgrounds. As a partner focused on student welfare and educational equality, I strongly recommend termination. She flinched. Actually flinched. For the first time in my life, she couldn't interrupt, couldn't dismiss me, couldn't talk over me. My words went on the official record, and this time, my voice carried weight. The meeting continued, but honestly, I barely heard the rest, because in that moment, I knew. Her reign of cruelty was coming to an end. A week after the advisory hearing, the district announced that a final decision meeting would be held publicly at the school board's main auditorium. It was rare. Most cases were handled behind closed doors. But given the volume of complaints and the pressure from parents, they made this one open, transparent. The room was packed. Parents, students, teachers. Even members of the local press sat scattered across the rows. Whispers filled the air. Everyone knew this wasn't just any hearing. This was something bigger. I walked down the central aisle, feeling hundreds of eyes following me. Some people recognized me, some didn't. And some, former classmates, old teachers, whispered my name in disbelief. Is that Liam Carter? No way. That can't be him. He owns that education company now, right? I took my seat at the front, right next to the district officials and school board members, the same seats that Mrs. Dorsey once stood before as an untouchable authority figure. But today, she wasn't the one in power. Then the side door opened. She walked in, her face tense, her posture stiffer than ever. She glanced around, expecting support, expecting familiarity. Instead, she saw people looking at her with narrowed eyes, cold expressions. Parents whose kids she'd belittled, students who never forgot her cruel words. And then, her eyes locked on me. She stopped mid-step. You could actually see her knees buckle slightly. Her mouth opened, like she wanted to say something, but then closed again. Her face went pale, drained of every ounce of color. Gone was the smug smile from the Uber. Gone was the arrogant glare from the classroom days. All that was left was a woman realizing, maybe for the first time, that the ground beneath her wasn't as solid as she thought. The district superintendent stood up and addressed the room. We are here today to review the findings of the advisory panel concerning allegations brought against Mrs. Dorsey. They went through the charges, one by one. Evidence, witnesses, testimonies. Every word was another crack in the foundation of the empire she thought she built on fear. She tried to defend herself, tried to say things like, I was just being strict, or students misunderstand discipline for rudeness. But the statements from the advisory board, especially mine, were airtight, detailed, factual, unemotional, but devastating. And then the superintendent turned to me directly. Mr. Carter, as an advisory partner who has reviewed the evidence extensively, do you have any final statements for the board? I stood, calm, clear, controlled. Yes, I do. I turned, not just to the board, but to the entire auditorium. My voice echoed through the room. There are teachers who build, and there are teachers who break. For years, Mrs. Dorsey believed it was her job to decide which students deserved a future. I stand here today as living proof that she was wrong, and I'm not the only one. The evidence speaks for itself. This isn't about revenge. This is about protecting the next generation from someone who used their position to harm rather than help. Silence, heavy, sharp, and then applause. It started in the back, small, hesitant, but spread. Parents, former students, teachers who were tired of pretending not to notice. Mrs. Dorsey didn't look up. Her eyes stayed locked on the floor, shoulders slumped, powerless. For the first time in my life, the weight wasn't on my back anymore. It was on hers. The superintendent raised his hand, signaling for the applause to quiet down. His expression was firm now. No hesitation, no second guessing. "Thank you, Mr. Carter. Your statement will be entered into the official record." He turned to Mrs. Dorsey. "Mrs. Dorsey, before the board proceeds with its decision, you may offer a final statement if you wish." She stood up slowly, but the woman who once ruled classrooms with icy arrogance was gone. What remained was a hollow shell trying to salvage whatever scraps of dignity she could. Her voice trembled in a way I never imagined possible from her. I never meant, I was just trying to maintain standards. You can't expect every student to—" Her words trailed off. She couldn't finish the sentence, not in front of me, not in front of the students, the parents, and the community that had come to witness the reckoning. For a brief moment, our eyes met again. But there was no fight left in her. No condescension, no superiority, just fear. And in that look, I saw it. The full realization of what she'd done. Years of cutting down students. Years of planting doubt, shame, and humiliation. And now, every seed of cruelty had finally sprouted, right there, in full public view. The board began reading the findings. One by one, the conclusions echoed through the room like gavel strikes in a courtroom. A consistent pattern of verbal abuse, documented emotional harm to students, violation of district policies regarding equitable treatment, failure to provide a safe and supportive learning environment. Each line felt like a chapter of her own indictment being read aloud, and she had to sit there, powerless. Then the board chair spoke the words she never thought she'd hear. Effective immediately, Mrs. Dorsey is relieved of her duties as an educator within this district. Furthermore, this board will recommend that her teaching license be revoked at the state level. There was no dramatic outburst, no screaming, no defense left to give, just silence. Mrs. Dorsey slowly sank back into her chair, her face pale, eyes glassy. It was over. I glanced behind me, at the parents nodding in relief, at the former students exchanging quiet smiles, at the teachers who never had the courage to speak until now. And in that moment, something became crystal clear. This wasn't just my victory. This was every student she ever tried to break, every kid who walked out of her classroom thinking they weren't enough. And finally, the debt had been paid. The past always comes to collect. As the board finalized the decision, the atmosphere in the room shifted. It was no longer tense. It was heavy with closure. A closure that had been years in the making. The superintendent folded his hands, glanced at the notes, and delivered the final statement. Let the record show that the recommendation for immediate termination is unanimous. Furthermore, the district will submit formal documentation to the State Board of Education to initiate the process of revoking Mrs. Dorsey's teaching license permanently. No room for doubt, no loopholes, no more hiding behind tenure, years of service, or outdated systems that protected the wrong people for too long. Mrs. Dorsey sat motionless. Her hands clutched her bag, knuckles white, but her eyes never rose from the table. The same woman who once stood tall, looking down on students like they were beneath her, was now crushed beneath the weight of her own choices. The superintendent continued, his tone firm but controlled. This board acknowledges the bravery of the students, parents, and community members who came forward. We especially recognize Mr. Liam Carter for his contribution to this investigation and for his continued work in advancing educational equity. For a moment, all I could do was breathe. Just breathe. I wasn't used to hearing my name in sentences like that. For so many years, I was the kid nobody noticed, except when someone needed an easy target. Now, I was a name on the right side of history. The board dismissed the meeting. People stood, shaking hands, exchanging words of relief, of gratitude. Some came over to thank me personally. Parents whose kids had been hurt by her. Former students who finally felt seen. Teachers who quietly whispered, "You did what we never could." Mrs. Dorsey stood up slowly. For a brief second, she looked like she was going to walk over to me. Maybe to apologize, maybe to argue, maybe out of sheer habit. But then her eyes flicked to the nameplate in front of me. Liam Carter, CEO. And whatever thought crossed her mind vanished. Her shoulders slumped. Her hands tightened around her bag. She turned and walked out of the auditorium without saying a word. No eye contact. No farewell. Just gone. The doors closed behind her with a finality that felt symbolic. I stood there for a while, looking around. The same auditorium where, years ago, I sat in assemblies as a nobody. Now I stood here as a partner to the district, someone whose voice changed something real. As I walked out into the bright sunlight, a weight I'd carried for half my life lifted off my shoulders, not because I crushed someone, but because I reclaimed what she tried to steal from me. My worth, my voice, my future. This wasn't just the end of her story. It was the beginning of mine. News travels fast in small towns. By the time I walked out of that auditorium, the story was already spreading like wildfire. Parents texting parents, former students blowing up group chats, teachers whispering behind closed doors. "Mrs. Dorsey's been fired. Did you hear?" Liam Carter was part of the decision. No, not part of it. He led it. Meanwhile, the district released an official statement. Local media picked it up within hours. Headlines like, "Longtime teacher fired after misconduct investigation. District partner, former student, plays key role in decision." Her name was everywhere, but not for the reasons she spent her life chasing. I didn't check, but people told me she tried to defend herself online, posted vague, bitter comments about how the world is too soft now and how no one respects discipline anymore. But nobody bought it, not anymore. Her fall wasn't just professional. It was total. The community turned. Friends disappeared. Her reputation was ruined beyond repair. I heard whispers that she tried applying to private schools and was rejected everywhere. Her license was under state review, likely to be revoked permanently. And me? My life went in the opposite direction. The school district expanded our partnership. Other districts started calling. Level Up Hub became a regional name, then a state-level name. I was invited to give keynote speeches about resilience, innovation, and educational reform. I sat on panels with superintendents, CEOs, and community leaders, people who, 10 years earlier, wouldn't have given me the time of day. One afternoon, I got an email from the mayor's office. They wanted to honor me at the annual community leadership event. As I stood on that stage, receiving an award engraved with my name, I glanced down at the audience and saw faces that once mocked me, doubted me, ignored me. Not out of spite, not out of revenge, just as a reminder that the world spins, and sometimes it spins perfectly. But the real reward wasn't the plaque. It was walking past the high school on my way home and seeing the banners with our company's logo hanging right on the front lawn. The same building that once tried to bury me now carried my name. I didn't just survive Mrs. Dorsey. I outgrew her. I outbuilt her. I outlived her shadow. And in the end, the lesson was simple. People like her fall. People like me rise. A few months after everything settled, I found myself driving past my old high school one evening. The sun was setting behind the building, casting long shadows over the entrance. For a moment, I parked across the street and just sat there, watching, thinking. It was strange. That place used to haunt me. The walls felt like prison bars back then, filled with voices telling me I wasn't good enough, that I'd never be anything more than background noise in someone else's success story. But looking at it now, it was just bricks, glass, concrete, nothing more. Mrs. Dorsey, she was gone. Her name erased from the faculty list, her face no longer lurking behind classroom doors. The damage she did wouldn't be forgotten easily, but she would. Eventually, she'd just become a cautionary tale, a story parents told their kids about why kindness matters. And me? I wasn't that scared kid anymore. I wasn't even the Uber driver she mocked that day. I was the man who turned pain into power, failure into fuel, and doubt into dominance. Funny thing about life, the people who try to bury you never realize you're a seed. I thought about my parents, about all those nights they worked overtime, scraping every penny just so I could have a shot. About my dad's words that day under the hood of that broken van. Broken things can be fixed, as long as someone's willing to get their hands dirty. He was right. I fixed it. I fixed me. And I built something better than anything anyone ever expected from a kid like me. But here's the truth. The real justice wasn't her downfall. It was that I stood here, alive, thriving, and proud. that I turned everything she used to try to crush me into the very foundation of my success. The best revenge isn't making someone fall. It's standing so tall. They have to look up just to see where you are now. I smiled, started the car, and pulled away from that old building. No longer a symbol of pain, but a reminder that the past doesn't define me. I define me, and the world, it's mine now.